You don't remember deciding to become this way. There was no meeting, no announcement, no moment where you said, "From now on, I will erase myself to survive." It just happened. You learned to read the room faster than you learned to read books. You learned how to soften your voice before you learned how to say no. You learned that being liked felt safer than being honest. And now, years later, people describe you with words that sound like compliments, but feel strangely hollow. You're so nice, so easygoing, so understanding, so low maintenance. But underneath those words, there's a quiet exhaustion you can't quite name. Because what they're really describing is how little trouble you cause, how little space you take, how little resistance you offer. Here's the crazy paradox that shapes our lives. What once kept you safe is now the very thing that's suffocating you. Being nice saved you, and now it's costing you your voice. You're not angry, but you're resentful. You're not unhappy, but you're numb. You're not lost, but you're profoundly disconnected from yourself. You say yes when your body says no. You smile when something inside you collapses. You over-explain, over-give, over-accommodate, then wonder why you feel invisible even in rooms full of people. And the most painful part, you don't feel allowed to stop. Because somewhere deep in your nervous system is the belief that niceness is the price of belonging, that love must be earned through emotional labor, that if you become difficult, honest, or inconvenient, you will be abandoned. So you keep being kind, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. This isn't kindness. This is survival. To understand how being nice became dangerous, we have to strip it of its moral language and look at it neurologically, developmentally, and psychologically. What you call niceness is often over-adaptation. Over-adaptation happens when a child learns that the environment is emotionally unpredictable or unsafe, and responds by molding themselves into whatever shape reduces conflict. This is closely tied to hypervigilance. It is attunement turned inward into fear. Your nervous system learned to constantly scan for emotional shifts. Who's upset? Who's withdrawing? Who needs something? Who might explode if I say the wrong thing? Your brain prioritized other people's moods over your own internal signals. Over time, this rewires the default mode network, the brain system responsible for self-referential thought. Instead of asking, "What do I need?" your brain learned to ask, "What do they need me to be right now?" This pattern is common in children who experienced parentification, where a child becomes emotionally responsible for adults, or in environments where love was conditional upon behavior. Not abuse in the obvious sense, but emotional economics. Affection given when you're agreeable, distance when you're not. You learned that being yourself was risky, but being useful was safe, and so your personality became a function, not an expression. This often develops alongside anxious or avoidant attachment, where connection feels unstable and must be maintained through performance rather than presence. You weren't taught how to exist in relationships. You were taught how to manage them. Niceness, then, is not a trait. It's a strategy that tells your nervous system, "If I am pleasant enough, no one will leave." But strategies built for survival become prisons when they're mistaken for identity. The deepest cost of being nice is not burnout. It's self-betrayal. Every time you override your truth to preserve harmony, something in you learns that your inner world is negotiable. And slowly, subtly, you grieve a version of yourself you were never allowed to be. Carl Jung warned that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. But there is another burden rarely named: the unlived life of the self. You sacrifice authenticity for belonging. You trade aliveness for approval. You learn to feel safe by feeling less. Your fear isn't conflict, it's exposure, because exposure risks rejection, and rejection, to your nervous system, still feels like annihilation. So even joy becomes complicated. Even rest feels unsafe. Even anger feels forbidden. You don't explode. You disappear. You turn pain inward. You rationalize mistreatment. You call your needs too much before anyone else can. This creates what philosophers call existential incongruence, a life lived in contradiction to one's internal truth. You look functional, but internally, there's a quiet mourning for the voice you swallowed. For the anger you never expressed. For the self who learned that love required shrinking. Niceness becomes a form of moral camouflage. A way to be above reproach while remaining unseen. And invisibility, over time, becomes loneliness. In adulthood, this coping strategy doesn't disappear. It mutates. You might recognize yourself in these patterns. You over-explain your boundaries if you set them at all. You justify your needs as if they require permission. You attract emotionally unavailable or entitled partners because you're fluent in giving without receiving. You excel at work, but feel resentful and unseen. You become indispensable, not valued. You struggle with anger or only feel it privately. It leaks out as guilt, anxiety, or self-criticism. You fear being difficult more than being exhausted. You choose depletion over disapproval. You feel disconnected from desire because wanting was never safe, only accommodating. These are not flaws. They are coping strategies mistaken for character traits. Healing does not begin by forcing assertiveness. It begins with witnessing. Witnessing the moment your body tenses before you say yes. Witnessing the guilt that arises when you choose yourself. Witnessing the fear, not judging it. Because the goal is not to eradicate the strategy, but to update it. Your nervous system is loyal to an old world that no longer exists. Unlearning niceness means grieving its necessity, honoring the child who needed it, and gently teaching the adult that safety no longer requires self-erasure. Healing begins when you stop asking, "How do I become less nice?" and start asking, "What did my niceness protect me from?" This is where inner child reparenting begins, not by fixing the past, but by responding differently in the present. You practice letting discomfort exist without rescuing others from it. You practice choosing softness without self-abandonment. You practice boundaries as acts of intimacy, not rejection. This is also shadow work, integrating the disowned parts of you. The anger, the selfishness, the need. You don't become cruel. You become whole. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are. Wholeness is not loud. It is not aggressive. It is not performative. It is quietly honest. And when you stop being nice out of fear and start being kind out of choice, your relationships change. Not because you're better, but because you're real. You were never meant to be palatable. You were meant to be present. And the world does not need more nice people who disappear. It needs whole people who stay." If you want more content that explores the psychology behind your patterns and the silent agreements you never realized you made, please like and share this with someone who could benefit from it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to navigate this inner work alone. Remember, the goal isn't to fix you. It's to help you feel whole at last.